Rejection is, I think, one of the oldest and most painful experiences that a human can endure. It cuts deeper than we often care to admit. It taps into something primal, this ancient fear of being cast out from the tribe, of being left alone, of being deemed unworthy. And most of us feel rejection at some point, right? Most of us find ways, though, to heal from it, or at least to carry it without letting it define us. But not everyone heals. Some wounds fester. Some rejection stories don't actually get resolved. They sit there raw and bleeding and quietly reshaping the way that we see ourselves and the way we see others around us and really the way we see the world around us. And then the internet shows up. The internet that's vast and endless and immediate. A space where you can find 1,000 people in a second who feel exactly the way you do. Angry, hurt, bitter, rejected, all of the things. Space where instead of healing, pain gets mirrored back to you. And it gets validated and it gets amplified and weaponized. And so it starts small. It starts as a video that speaks to your frustration, or a forum where people are venting the same anger that you feel but we're too ashamed to admit. A comment section where blame feels far easier than grief, where the algorithms are designed to feed us what keeps us engaged. And pain, especially when it flirts with outrage, is incredibly engaging. So the internet does what it's built to do. It serves more of that content to you. More content that validates your anger, more communities that echo your resentment, and more stories that justify your worst assumptions about others and about yourself in the midst of others. And what was once personal now, by way of pain, becomes this collective grievance. And so your isolation becomes your identity. You see, rejection isolates. The radicalization offers some sense of belonging. It tells you that you're not alone, that you're not broken, that you're not the problem. It's they who are. And that they becomes very important. It's no longer about one person who hurt you, but now it's an entire group, an entire system, an entire way of life that you believe is against you. It's easier to be angry at the entire world than to sit alone in your own pain, isn't it? And so the blame is easier than the healing. Blame is like a short-term sedative of sorts. It numbs the ache. It gives you someone to point the finger at as the one who's responsible. It lets you trade vulnerability of sadness for the power of anger. But it's a false power, because the anger doesn't heal the wound, it deepens the wound. And the more you marinate in blame, the less capable you are of receiving connection. And the more you isolate yourself, the harder it becomes to see your pain clearly. And the more radical your beliefs become, the more validated you feel by the communities that thrive on the outrage. But the algorithm is not neutral. I mean, we often talk about the internet as if it's this neutral space, but it's not. You see, the systems that govern what we see, search engines, social media platforms, video recommendations, they're designed to maximize the engagement and not your well-being. Nothing keeps us more engaged than outrage. So if you're hurting, if you're lonely, if you're vulnerable, the internet doesn't offer healing to you. It offers you an enemy. It offers you someone to blame. It offers you a community of people who will tell you that your pain is justified and that your hatred is righteous. And so we go down this slippery slope. And the descent is slow at first. You don't notice that your worldview is shrinking, right? You don't notice that your empathy is eroding. And you don't notice that your loneliness is turning into rage. Until one day, you look around and you realize you no longer recognize yourself. And what started off once as hurt has now become hate. And what started as isolation has now become radicalization. And what was once a wound has now become this weapon. And the scariest part is, it actually feels good. It feels powerful. It feels safe. But here's why integrity and intimacy are the antidotes. See, radicalization thrives where integrity and intimacy are absent. Integrity is that alignment between what you value and how you live it. And it prevents you from outsourcing your pain onto others. It in essence keeps you honest about your hurt without letting it metastasize into hatred. And intimacy, like the real grounded connection there, offers that sense of belonging that outrage falsely promises. It says, you are seen, you're loved, you're not alone, and you don't have to turn your wounds into weapons. Without integrity, anger runs unchecked. And without intimacy, loneliness festers. And the internet can't offer these things, right? It can't offer you love. The internet can't see you. It can't hold you accountable for your best self. Only real human connection can do that. Only integrity can pull you back when your pain threatens to harden you. It's only intimacy that can remind you that you are not your wounds. And here's the invitation. The invitation is, if you're hurting, if you're lonely, if you felt the pull toward blame and bitterness, this is not a condemnation. It's, again, this invitation, an invitation to pause and to breathe. To ask, what do I really need right now in this moment? Do I need an enemy or a friend? Do I need a target or a safe place where I can be known? Blame might feel powerful, but it's hollow. Connection feels risky, yes, but it's real. And integrity feels difficult, but it's healing. Intimacy feels vulnerable, but it's really what saves us. You don't have to let the internet radicalize your pain. You can actually choose a different path. But let me just spend a moment and talk about the anatomy of this online radicalization. It's easy to think of radicalization as a fringe problem, right? That it only happens on the extremes. That it's about politics or ideologies far removed from our everyday lives. But the truth is, radicalization actually begins in very familiar places. A comment thread after a breakup video, perhaps, or a discussion forum for people who feel invisible. A series of YouTube recommendations after you search, why doesn't anyone love me? So it doesn't start with extremists, it starts with pain. And pain is the gateway, if you will. Radicalization starts when pain goes unseen or unvalidated or unhealed. Rejection leaves you in this raw state, and loneliness leaves you vulnerable, and failure leaves you ashamed, perhaps. And into that void steps the internet, not to heal, but to explain. And it offers answers, like quick answers, easy answers, answers that feel good because they take the burden of pain off your shoulders and place it squarely on the shoulders of others. You're not lonely because connection is hard, and you're lonely because they are shallow. You're not rejected because dating is complicated. You're rejected because they are cruel. You're not failing because life is tough. You're failing because the system is rigged against you. It's a powerful narrative, powerful story, and you are the victim in it. They are the enemy, and you're the one who's righteous. And that's a storyline that is incredibly attractive to someone who's drowning in their hurt. And so we got these echo chambers where the pain continues to multiply, and online spaces make it easy to find others who are hurting in similar ways that you are. And at first, that feels like connection. Finally, someone who understands me. Finally, someone sees my pain. But the echo chambers don't foster healing though. They foster resentment. Every hurt is validated, but it's never soothed. Every grievance is echoed, but it's never resolved. Every fear is magnified, but never calmed. It's like shouting into a canyon and hearing your own rage come right back even louder. The algorithms are the silent engine, and they keep these echo chambers alive. These algorithms are so sophisticated, they're invisible systems that notice what you keep like when you keep scrolling, where you're clicking and engaging, and they give you far more of it. They don't ask whether the content is good for you. They ask only one question, and that is, will this keep you here longer? Outrage keeps you longer than hope. And blame will keep you longer than self-reflection. Fear will keep you longer than connection will. And so you're fed a steady diet of content that stokes your pain and sharpens your resentment and hardens your heart ultimately. Not because anyone set out to radicalize you, but because the system, it doesn't care whether you heal or whether you stay. So we go from isolation to extremism. See, radicalization isn't a leap, it's a slow walk. It's a gradual shift from I'm hurting to I'm a victim to they are to blame. And then from there you go to they deserve to be punished. And the more isolated you feel, the more appealing the community of outrage becomes. It becomes familiar. And the more outraged you consume, the more justified you feel in this sense of bitterness you're in. And the more justified you feel, the less you're able to empathize with anyone who's outside your bubble. And without empathy, extremism is very hard to reach. It becomes the logical endpoint of a long paved road that's paved with unresolved pain. But here's why integrity is non-negotiable. Integrity is what interrupts that slide. It forces you to ask the hard questions. Is this belief aligned with my deepest values, for example? Is this anger masking something that's softer, like fear or sadness or even grief? Is this blame really helping me to heal? See, integrity is about alignment, not with what feels good in the moment, but what's good for your soul in the long run. It's about choosing truth over comfort and responsibility over blame. It's about choosing healing over hatred. See, without integrity, it's easy to drift wherever the current of pain will take you. With integrity, though, you have this anchor. You can feel the pull toward resentment and still say, no, I'm not going to let my pain turn me into someone that I don't want to be. And here's why intimacy is helpfully protective. Intimacy protects against radicalization because it fills that void that isolation leaves. Real intimacy, where you're seen and where you're known, where you can show up without the armor, it soothes what the radicalization really exploits. It reminds you, I'm not alone. I'm not broken beyond repair. I'm still worthy of love, even in my imperfection. And it's much harder to fall into hatred when you have spaces where your humanity is honored. It's much harder to blame entire groups of people when you have real, vulnerable relationships with individuals from those groups. You see, intimacy disrupts the narrative of us versus them. And it refuses to let you reduce people to categories. It insists that you see and be seen, like fully. And being seen fully is the beginning of healing. Healing is not algorithmic, though. The internet can feed your pain, it can stoke your outrage, and it can simplify your bitterness. But here's what it can't do. It cannot heal you. Healing requires slow work. It requires face-to-face presence. It requires the courage to sit in discomfort without running to blame. It requires the integrity to own your own hurt. It requires the intimacy to share your hurt with others. It requires something that no algorithm could ever offer, and that's real, messy, inconvenient human connection. So here's what choosing a different path could look like. You don't have to accept the path that the internet lays out for you. You don't have to let rejection, for example, become resentment. You don't have to let the loneliness become hatred. You don't have to let the pain become your identity. You can choose healing. You can choose connection. You can choose integrity and intimacy. You have the power to choose to build a life that the internet cannot radicalize because it's grounded in something that's deeper than the algorithms can reach. And that is your groundedness in truth and your groundedness in love and in the fierce and often fragile work of the being human in community. But there's a cost, though, a human cost of this digital radicalization. It's tempting to think that radicalization is something that happens out there, something abstract, right? Something political, something that's distant from our personal lives. The truth, however, is that radicalization is not just a headline. It isn't just a news story. It's something that's deeply human. It's deeply personal, and it has devastating costs. Not just for society at large, but for the individual hearts that harden in the process. But what radicalization steals, though, is it steals empathy. The longer you marinate in the resentments, the harder it becomes to see the humanity in others. Pain has this way of distorting perception. And so you stop seeing people as fellow individuals. You start seeing them instead as threats, as enemies, as categories. And when empathy dies, connection dies with it. Radicalization also steals curiosity as well. When you're radicalized, you no longer are asking questions to understand. Instead, you're asking questions to attack. And you don't listen to learn. You listen so you can get ammunition. Curiosity, though, the heart of intimacy, it gets replaced by certainty. A rigid, brittle certainty that leaves no room for complexity or nuance or compassion. And you already know who's to blame. You don't have to ask. You already know who's wrong. You're certain and you already know who deserves your anger. And the tragedy is, the more certain you become, the lonelier you get. Because real connection requires uncertainty. It requires vulnerability. It requires a willingness to be changed by what you hear. And finally, radicalization steals hope as well. When you live inside a worldview that's shaped by grievance and fueled by shame and blame, hope feels naive. And you stop believing in the possibility of healing. You stop believing in the possibility of change. And you stop believing that life can get better, that you can get better. So hope becomes weakness, and cynicism becomes wisdom, and bitterness becomes protection. And slowly, quietly, your world begins to shrink, and the isolation deepens. One of the cruelest ironies of radicalization is that it promises belonging, but it delivers isolation. At first, the online communities feel like connection, right? People who understand your pain, people who validate your anger, people who reinforce your worldview. But over time, the echo chamber begins to tighten, and you're surrounded not by friends, but by reflections of your own bitterness. Not by allies, but by amplifiers of your pain that you're suffering with. And real intimacy, the kind that involves seeing and being seen, is impossible in a space where only outrage is welcome. So the very thing that you're longing for, which is connection, drifts further and further out of reach. But integrity and intimacy are the way back. Integrity and intimacy are not just antidotes, they are lifelines. Here, integrity reconnects you to yourself once again. It asks questions like, who am I when I'm not performing my pain for others? Or who am I when I'm not outsourcing my hurt into hatred? Who am I when I choose alignment over approval of others? Integrity rebuilds trust, not just with others, but most importantly with yourself. It allows you to be honest about your wounds without weaponizing these wounds again. It allows you to name the hurt without handing it a sword. And intimacy reconnects you to others. Real intimacy, not the false connection of outrage forums or grievance groups, but the raw and tender work of showing up authentically, of saying, I am hurting. I don't have all the answers. I'm scared. I want to understand, not just to be understood. Intimacy requires risk, though. It requires letting go of armor of certainty. It requires you opening yourself to the possibility of change, of connection, and of healing. But it's worth it, because real intimacy does what no radicalized ideology can do. Intimacy sees. It helps you hold. It reminds you that you are not your wounds, and you're not your anger. You're not your bitterness. Intimacy reminds you that you are human, and that you are loved, and that you are worth healing. But it takes courage to step out of this mold, doesn't it? Stepping out of radicalization is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage, the kind of courage that looks weak from the outside, but is fierce at its core. The courage to be uncertain, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to open up. It requires walking away from communities that validate your anger. It requires admitting that the enemy that you've been fighting might not be an enemy at all. It requires the humility to say, I want something different. I want something that goes deeper. I want something that is real. So choosing healing over hatred is transformative. See, hatred feels powerful, it feels energizing, it feels righteous at times, but it corrodes from the inside out. Whereas healing feels slower and softer, and it's harder to measure. But what it does, it starts rebuilding from the inside out. It strengthens, it restores. It's choosing healing over hatred as this radical act in a world that profits from your outrage. That is, it's a rebellion against the algorithms. It's a reclaiming of your own humanity. And it's a choice to say, I will not let my pain make me cruel. I refuse to let my wounds define who I am. I will not let the internet tell me who I am. So let me just remind you, you're not alone. If you feel the pull of bitterness, if you feel the weight of loneliness, if you hear the whispers of blame that are growing louder inside, know this. You're not alone in your experience. There is another way. There's a quieter way. And it's harder as well, too. Let me just be upfront. It's hard, but it's a better way. A way that's built on integrity, a way that's built on intimacy, a way that's built on the slow and sacred work of healing. The internet may want to weaponize your pain, but you can actually reclaim it. You can choose connection over cruelty. You can choose love over bitterness. You can choose to come back to yourself. And building a life that the internet cannot weaponize is probably a noteworthy goal. What would it look like to live a life that the internet cannot touch by way of radicalization? A life that is not built on anger, and it's not built on bitterness, nor is it built on grievances, but instead it's built on integrity and on intimacy, on connection that the algorithms have no way to touch. Imagine that with me. For starters, you can reclaim your pain. Pain that is denied becomes bitterness, right? And pain that is avoided becomes blame. Pain that is outsourced becomes hate. But pain that is reclaimed, pain that is faced and felt and named, that now becomes wisdom. Reclaiming your pain means being honest about what is actually hurting. It means saying, I am lonely and I'd like connection. I feel invisible and I want to be seen. Or I'm afraid I'll never be loved and I want to experience that kind of love. It means sitting with those truths without rushing to blame someone else for them. And that's uncomfortable. That's vulnerable, but it's necessary. Because you can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. And then you'll have the opportunity to anchor yourself in integrity. Integrity is your anchor when the currents of the internet try to sweep you away. It's what keeps you steady when the algorithm whispers, be angrier, be louder, be crueler. Integrity says, no, I will live in alignment with my values, and I will not betray who I am just so that I can belong to a crowd that is bitter. See, living with integrity means that you're being honest when lies are easier. You're choosing kindness even when cruelty is louder. You're choosing to stay grounded even when outrage feels electric. It's not glamorous work, and it most likely will not trend. It won't give you a viral feed, but it will save your soul. And then pursue real intimacy. The internet offers counterfeit intimacy, or the illusion of connection without the risk of vulnerability. But real intimacy is different. Real intimacy is messy. It's slow, it's risky. Real intimacy requires showing up without a mask. It requires letting people see the parts of you that don't fit into a common thread or a TikTok soundbite. And so it means building relationships where you are known and not just validated, where you are challenged but not just coddled, where you are loved but not just agreed with. So pursuing real intimacy might mean fewer followers, but it will mean deeper friendships. And it might mean less applause, but it will mean more peace. And then limit your exposure. You can't build integrity and intimacy if you're constantly bathing in outrage. So this doesn't mean cutting yourself off from the world. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't mean living in a bubble, but it does mean being intentional about who you are and what you're consuming, about who you're listening to and letting influence you, about where you spend your emotional energy. So ask yourself, is this feeding my anger or is it feeding my compassion? Is this deepening my bitterness or my empathy? Is this reinforcing my outrage or my integrity? The internet profits from your outrage, but you don't have to feed it. You can choose to step away. You can choose to unplug. You can choose to protect your peace. And then be this lighthouse to others around you. You don't have to be perfect or flawless to be a beacon for others. You just have to be willing to live with integrity when others choose performance, willing to pursue intimacy when others settle for the echo chambers, willing to heal when others choose to harden. So in a world that profits from your pain, healing, again, is this act of rebellion. Choosing connection is a radical act. Choosing love is a revolutionary act. Choosing to see and be seen is courage on display. You can be the lighthouse for someone else who's lost in the storm of outrage. You can be the reminder that healing is possible. That connection is real. That humanity is still worth fighting for. Because this is how we build a bridge back to us. Radicalization is not inevitable. It's a symptom of wounds that are left untended, loneliness that hasn't had a chance to speak, or pain that's been unnamed. But there is this bridge back, a bridge that's built with integrity, of the quiet, steady work of living aligned with your values that matter most to you. A bridge that's built on intimacy, where tender and risky work of being known and knowing others happens. And it's not flashy, it's not easy. It's not algorithm friendly, but it's real, and it's strong, and it can keep carrying us back to each other. So consider this in my final moments. If you're hurting, if you're lonely, if you're angry, consider pausing. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this the life that I want to build? Is this the person I want to become? Is this the legacy that I want to leave? See, the internet can weaponize your pain, but it cannot define your humanity. You can reclaim your story. You can choose healing over hatred. You can choose connection over cruelty. You have the ability to choose integrity over outrage. And you can choose intimacy over isolation. You can choose to be human, like fully, fiercely tender human in a world that desperately needs that kind of courage. Because the bridge back to us is waiting. So let's start walking that bridge together. You got this.